to, hey, I see something, or after, not see, interject. 'Cause
Okay.
I'll free flow pretty well, and you better,
That's perfect.
as my friend goes, bring it back, bring it back.
Oh man, hey, that is perfect. Oh, this is Katie McGann. It is April 17th, 2024, and I'm here with Jack Rybicki doing an oral history interview for the Newbury Town Library. Thank you for being here today, Jack.
Katie, thank you for having me, and I look forward to the interaction here now, and perhaps for just one other person someday in the future listening to us would be rewarding enough. Thank you. I see one of the first questions we've laid out is how long I've been in Newbury.
Yeah.
I moved to Newbury. My wife is from Newburyport. I was born in the Salem Village section of Danvers, which of course means we were the heartbeat of Witch Central. I say to you that was why I'm probably sitting here talking to Katie McGann right now, because that was the birth of my passionate interest in history, local, national history, but with a very heavy local bent. It was fabulous to learn then, and as what I was taught then that's related to here was between the Newburyport or the Andover Turnpike out of Salem, which is Route 114 today, up to where it intersects the Merrimack River, and as the Merrimack River flows out to Newburyport, that there were effectively 4 grants. There was the Salem grant, there was the Rowley grant, or there was the Ipswich grant, then there was the Newbury grant, and then Reverend Ezekiel Rogers wanted to come along, so Ipswich and Newbury's grants were slightly impacted as those lands were redistributed for the Reverend Rogers. But what's fascinating is the evolution of all three are integral to the birth of this country, nation industry, agricultural pursuits, and very much carving a life out of a raw wilderness that impresses me to this day as I wander our town and area. I see one of the next questions is what brought me here. My wife being from Newburyport and me going from Danvers, I spent time in Vermont and came back. But why I came here is why a lot of people come here is that to me, there's 3 kinds of living. There's vertical living in a city, there's suburban living, and then there's rural living. For various reasons, we all like those 3 kinds of living. And I worked on a farm, and I appreciated the openness, and I came here because of it was as open as it could get in 1990 still. The land itself here is very self-protecting because it's rough, it's hard, it's rocky, and the tillable spots are tilled to this day or built upon because they're few and far between. But the blessings of this land, by the same token, were the river, the Parker River, Ipswich below us for the lower part of the North Shore communities, but we're talking about the Parker here, the Merrimack to a lesser degree, of course, because that wasn't harnessable for the first 100 years of our existence here. It was the Ipswiches and the Parkers and the other smaller rivers that fed to the larger ones that our robust group of patriots to be, as they came from Europe, learned to took their European notions, applied them, and it became American stuff. And the natural flow and twists of our Parker River in particular lent itself to, I use the term not loosely, but easy damming, because they were able to build it back. Every mill, my understanding always has been that you need 10 feet of head pressure to drive the multi-ton stones that would grist or turn the saw through a 2 or 3 foot in diameter piece of hardwood felled. And it made for, in our town, in our Byfield, at one point 7 dams from the Crane Pond area. The first would have been on what we know as River Street now, River to west to Main to Larkin Road to Central Street Falls. Each maintained a mill capability at one time or another. And to this day, the remnants are still here and are still palpable to the touch, because you can walk the grounds and understand what they were facing still. And in suburbs and in cities, due to the natural and organic growth, a lot of that was lost. When Michelle, my wife, and I were seeking to settle, we wanted that feel, and so we worked hard to be able to find a little ranch house that happened to be across from the Larkin and Morrill snuff mill on Larkin Road. And of course, being a passionate historian and landing next to a mill, it was very, very kumbaya for me. And to this day, to this minute, this great cathartic emotion when you tread the path that they treaded in the day, because it's not romantic by any stretch. It was hard. And a brief aside is, I'm more than humbled all the time that in the days of pre-electricity and using water power, that these gentlemen, under the force of Mother Nature running and not going dry, would work 24/7 under whale oil lamp and dust, and would carve out incredible living for these people. And we're in awe today of third shifters and whatnot, and the different style. The days of horse and buggy, horse if you were lucky, most of the time you were walking. And the idea that you dedicated yourself to that because that's the way you made a living. It wasn't arduous, it was a way of life, and it wasn't what we look back upon as hard. It was what you did. And I'd imagine 100 years from today, they'll be giggling at me sitting at this table undergoing I don't know what, because technology has advanced another 4 or 5 steps, and we get further away from the human touch. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about the history component.
That's fascinating.
Appreciate it. In just the 40 years that I moved here in early 90s, I was fortunate enough to meet Ben Pearson. Ben Pearson, I believe he was the 13th, and his wife Jean was still alive. And they still owned property across the street, and I was blessed. And of course, I kick myself now because I have 1,000 questions for Ben, and unfortunately, like all of us, we're a finite being. And I'm always honored by having the conversations I was able to have with Ben and his wife, and as well the Cunninghams, who are an incredibly integral part of capturing the history of this town. And I submit to you, I'm sitting here today because of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dick Cunningham right behind you, on top of his donated file cabinet.
An incredible, beautiful guy doing a lot of beautiful things all his life.
Yes.
I was in Scouts, and Dick and his family were very much involved in it, and always willing. And I think our community lends itself to willing, and I've never met a person in this town, end to end, who wasn't willing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so um, the other part of the history of the town, beyond the industrial part, is also very humbling, because Newbury, of course, being distinctly two villages until the 1900s, when Plum Island began to change itself through the Plum Island Beach Company into a residential location. But until 1900, we were two things, and that was Old Town farmers and Byfield industry. And Byfield was an incredible industry, and supported a lot of people, but the farmers too. Um, as I go around town, or you see the Spencer Pierce Little, you go to what's now Tender Crop, what was the Knight Farm, what was years before that, generations of tilled. And I say that, as did the millers and those persons building the what would become homes and the physical fabric of the town, what fed us quite literally was the farmers' industry and willingness to work those acres. To farming today, although there's a lot of machinery, is still an incredibly challenging profession, always subject to the whim of Mother Nature. And although we all salute it in a romantic way, I say that few of us on the whole, beyond 4 hours in a morning, would probably not want to do much more than that.
Yeah.
As opposed to a grocery store lifestyle. And that's not meant in any negative way, it's purely observational in the historical sense. There wasn't a lot of downtime, because there wasn't a lot of recreational time available. The mills closing during the slow runs of the river, or a few weeks before the harvest came, when you went from being a miller to being a corn harvester, and the corn harvesters during the milling time would become millers. And that fabric is something that you read about it, and you can feel, because the leaders in those days, the familiar names, the Littles, the Jackmans, the Noises, the Pearsons, all of the names that are on the first settlers monument, really spent a lot of time here. And it's fascinating that the businessmen and the larger farms are recognized and carry the name, but I'm as fascinated with the person who would have been like Katie or myself in that day, that when I walk the mill areas, or I walk the farm, or I walk the gorgeous marshes that were themselves too farmed, I'm able to see what they saw, and it just makes it more impressive what they were able to do by hand. And one of the funnier, a quick aside, one of the earlier eye-opening epiphanies during some of my historical research was, again, you're subject to, with pre-electricity, and you had candle makers, and it didn't cast a lot of light. You did what you had to do in the moment, and the tides forced you to work based on the tidal cycles, not our sun to moon cycle. And there was a particular store in Rowley whose business papers were saved and reviewed, and that person had made, it's a forest for the trees thing. They noticed that a heavy part of the accounting was a lot of spirits and foods, but at odd hours, and the gentleman had been a meticulous record keeper, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. He was doing robust business at these times, and it took a few years later for someone else to make note of wait, this aligns with the tide cycle. And this would be low tide time, and this is indicative of workers heading out to the tides and filling their pockets and backpacks with all the things you would want to have to go out. And the storekeeper understanding that he provides that service and getting up to do it, and not as a surprise, but that they knew that that was the tide cycle, and that they would spend days out there. They would build structures, temporary structures, and sleep underneath some of the hay that they had cut because the greenheads were too brutal in the moment. The salt hay was only harvested once a year. And I smile today that when you look out there and you see the pictures where there's hundreds upon hundreds of hay staddles out there, and it wasn't a commuting job. There was no such thing. And again, it's one of those moments, whether you're on the Greenbelt property around Kent Island, the William Forward Wildlife Area, the Federal Wildlife Area, the Crane Pond Wildlife Area here in Byfield, the Downfall area behind Orchard Street. I think I've loosely counted from where we sit, Katie, Crane Pond and Downfall represent almost 2,500 acres of pure wildlife and natural habitat, and it's scoured with stone walls that you can trace back through deedings and plan references to somebody was out there, because that was where somebody offered them you can have a place out there because you work at my mill, and that's my wood lot. You can build a house on there. And there's still foundations I find out there, foundations referenced, and it's not that I find them there. For those of us that wander the woods, so to speak, they're all loosely documented and fun to find.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating.
Absolutely, it really is.
I noticed one of the next things is talking about the almshouse.
Yeah.
Here in town. Triton, our high school, sits on the farm that was Silas Noyes' in 1828. Up until 1828, it was the Dummers of Dummer Academy. When they landed, of course, were highly rewarded for coming here, and they owned effectively all the way to what we know as Fatherland Farms today. But if the brothers, my recollection here is that after a generation or two of Dummers were here, like every generation, things need to be split, and what we know as the Caldwell Farm area was a first Dummer break-off. The Fatherland Farm that we know of today at Central Street area, that was also a Dummer break-off. But the almshouse land, 1828 to 1852, was the almshouse was the original welfare system for our all communities. It was a shared system, and you were put to work. It was a poorhouse, almshouse, poorhouse, poor people. It wasn't looked upon it wasn't a badge of honor, and there was a lot of terrible circumstance that would bring some people to there. One of the more eye-opening finds when I was doing the almshouse research was births and deaths that occurred at the almshouse, because of course they're human too there, and that you would righteously be put to work. The almshouse, you couldn't be a healthy bodied male between the age of 14 and 60. It was built for the infirm. It was built for women and children, and they didn't hang around doing nothing. They were tasked with tasks that would contribute to the whole. That some of the people in the records available who would be an almshouse resident was eye-opening to me, because you'd read that it was, I'm going to use John Smith, and it's not the historical John Smith, of course, but the John Smith was a sailor until he was 68 years old. He landed in Newbury Port, and he couldn't find another boat to go on because he wasn't as healthy as a young man could be. And if you've spent your life on the ocean in those days, that means you were in other ports. The idea a sailor had a girl in every port was because they spent years in each port attending to the ship's business before they moved on. And at the end of their lives, the last port was the last reside. And I say that there was, oh my goodness, I would say 6 to 10 of sailors that had no place to go, no family. Mothers, mothers left multifamily, 6 or 7 children in there, children dying there because of disease. Just the fact that there was a funeral expense accounting sheet is what drove me into that history. And in fact, there is an almshouse cemetery in our town, and it's on private property presently, but I think one of my goals for this generation is to come to recognize both the location of the almshouse being at Triton, and as well identifying the area of where tens of people were finally buried. Mm-hmm. And I think that each generation of historian finds something that needs to be revisited, not uncovered, because the information's always there. It just slowly doesn't get passed on anymore, and it takes a passion. We all have different passions. I love history. Some people like fishing. Some people, would spend hours on the other side of this room here reading book after book, which I would too if it was a history book. So it makes the world go round, and I look what I've found in other historical collections, not necessarily narratives, is what's come to be the fabric of where we sit today, and where, although the locals, and I smile that heartily because I've only been here 30 years, would tell you they're encroached upon, as we've talked about for the last 15, 20 minutes. I say to you that we're very fortunate, because with very little imagination, our world from where I sit right now can still be stripped very easily back 200 years. As I look out the window of our wonderful library, and I can see Ben Pearson, I can see Toppin Pearson, I can see Martha Pearson, I can see the other people that were part of this, J.O. Rogers and his shoe leather factory. It's easy to do, and we're very fortunate and blessed with that. And that was what, when I drove through the town the first time, I knew it was where I wanted to be, and I know where I will also end. It'll be hard. They say age and place. Be assured, I love. This is the place you want to age in place, where it's a lucky community in a number of reasons. We have ocean, we have fresh water, we have tides, we have open land, closed land. We're next to a fine city in Newburyport, and Ipswich itself, two wonderful bookends for us, where if you rode on 1A, you could go back and forth for years and not see all that built our country. We were a part of it. We didn't build it. first settlers may have a little bit of something to say about that, and I say that with a smile. However, I submit where I was born in Salem taught me a lot about what Salem produced for the fabric of our country, and as well, I have friends on the South Shore who will tell me that all of their contributions are as equally important as ours, and I submit to you it was, because there wasn't any mass organization in those days. We were a group of communities in survival mode for 100 years and overlapped accordingly as necessary. And of course, the thing we came together the most for was our freedom in 1776, and that's still seen here. And the infill of the cities or the suburbs, as they try to capture what or preserve what they have left, I salute their efforts. As I salute Katie's efforts here today to capture some of what remains for us, because once gone, it's hard to get back. And I would submit to all that who would listen here, if you have old photos or things that you don't think are of particular value, that be willing to offer it forward, because something in the background of your photo or a location of where you are is captured history. And the way I look back at a photo right now of 4 gentlemen in front of the lumber mill that was above us on West Street, I say, I don't know their names. I'll never know their names, but I know the wood I'm looking at is probably in a house I'm looking at, and it's their sweat and toil that got it that way. And we'll always be ground up country of people, not a top down country of mandates. And this town is a great example of that.
It is. It really is.
Looking further down, there's priorities, historical priorities, of course, are the same notion I just said. Is once gone, it's gone forever. I was very, very, very sad when they hoed the Larkin Morrow Mill across from my house. I was horrified. And it's the notion of money, the notion of preservation, the balance of the two is hard. It's hard for every generation. It's hard for every town. It's hard for nonprofits. It's hard for our households to balance preservation versus going new. But by the same token, in our town, we've sold the Yellow School. We've sold the Woodbridge School since 1990, and into private hands, and they look beautiful. I don't know that they couldn't have been repurposed to a citizens-centric future, but that's the past now. And I say that going forward, what history we do have now, we're coming up on our 400th anniversary in 2035, and the things we can touch backwards as a town are not going to often be available to preserve. And I think when opportunity presents itself, that for every citizen, it's incumbent to take the past into consideration, because it's hard to go forward unless you know where you've been. And to forget where you've been leads itself to maybe not such a structured future, and I don't imply recklessness by any stretch, but I know that one of the few possessions the town has physically now that's historical is our Lower Green Schoolhouse. And I would submit to everyone that it's a challenge to take care of things, all of us. But if we all chip in and we all understand the greater good nature of what we're saving, so that somebody else can come smell, taste, touch, and experience authenticity, not replication, I think it's an important discussion
Absolutely.
to always have.
It is. It's very difficult trying to find that balance.
I was as trustee for the Danvers Historical Society, and as a nonprofit, it's incredibly hard to keep a 1754 house or the Glen Magna estate going. And although, again, the romance of people wanting it there without the reality of what it takes to keep it there is a hard message, because within and under our own roofs, we're always challenged by economics. But like at our house, we understand there's certain priorities that can't be dismissed. I think historical preservation is something that needs serious reflection before it's ever dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
And I say again, it's once gone, long gone, and I'd advocate for very much pensive reflection before any summary decision is ever made to change what was built under the guise of it's better our way, because that's not history, that's imposing a history, and it's not a taste that I want in my mouth. And if it takes back-breaking labor, volunteer labor, I know that under circumstance, humans rally. And I think once asked, those that are of similar passion to a proper pursuit are very, very reachable, engageable, and want to help. And I believe that the projects I've been involved with in my decades of helping tell me that. Is it the same faces that come every time? That's okay, because our passions are different. And I'll help you fish. You can help me here, so to speak. And I think that plays. I do, because my friends and acquaintances and those who have come to salute the efforts successfully undertaken then want to be part of that shine. And I look forward to that in the next generation, that they too can discuss it without the concern first of money for honor, and then discuss the economic impact. Because although they are absolutely related, one comes before the other, and I won't back down from that.
That is extremely insightful. I agree.
I see, can we preserve the rural character moving into the future? Our country was predicated on private property rights, and what we all cherish of our own hard work is what we own. The ideal of protecting the rural character is I would be on my hands and knees saluting it as absolute. The reality of a family having holdings of land and wishing to make better their futures is something I won't stand in the way of. I can't. You wouldn't. I wouldn't. I wouldn't stand in good conscience, But by the same token, our topography has lent itself to a self-policing that I'm personally naturally blessed about, and I'm glad that the land is naturally blessed in that way, because it is so hard that it makes it difficult to bring that suburban feel here, although there is notion that it's necessary. But I submit too that as we all live within our means, so too can we come to always live within our means first, and that slow growth is fine growth, that we don't necessarily need to change what we all sought here. And I bring it back to the same notion of, if I wanted to live vertical, I'd move to Boston. If I wanted a busier life with more things to fill my day, then I would move to a suburban area of Danvers, Malden, Medford, Peabody, Salem, and all of that. I would, but it's not what my family chose to want. And to bring either of those to our area, I think I wouldn't call it preserving our rural character as much as I would say that it's protecting the fabric of life we've built here. And that's not a statement for not in my backyard. It's that we all, over the course of 400 years, have developed three distinct ways that we like to live as units. And I wouldn't want to bring something to the rural atmosphere that can't be undone. And again, it's not a not in my backyard thing. It's that what we have is worth what we've done through the years, and slow, moderate growth in those areas that can handle single family homes or duplexes or reasonable three families that can house us is absolutely within the character of the town, and would be absolutely advocated for. We don't want nothing. We don't want no people coming. The vibrancy of us dying and moving on lends itself to a next generation. Always. It'll never be not in my backyard, because I'm going to be gone and you're going to be in my backyard. So I submit that if there's a protection of the rural nature, it's only in the zoning component of if we seek to accept more means more of everything. And again, I think that's a personal choice we all make, and why we landed here is we didn't want those other two lifestyles. We wanted this lifestyle. And I hope that if there's to be a statement about protecting or preserving it, it's that slow growth and living within our means on a town level is what we choose to do at the kitchen table level of our homes, and I think is a worthy consideration for any thoughts of a monumental growth effort in any way, shape, or form, in the name of we need more money, or we need something that perhaps we don't, or that we can, as we would in our own homes, perhaps modify in a different way. We're Yankees at the heart, all of us. Use it till it's all used up. And I think in a throwaway world as today, too often we don't fix things. We move on and think it's better. And I go back to the historical nature of the schoolhouses. If we keep destroying, thinking we're always better, we'll never know why we're better, because we have nothing to compare it to, because we destroyed everything we came from. And it doesn't make sense to me on just a dope Polish level. And I say that lovingly, because I am all the good parts. I say Katie is Polish of me. So my parents, I say to the readers here, my father was a second generation Polish immigrant, the youngest of 9. His mother came from Poland. They landed in Salem. His 8 older siblings worked at the Pequot Mills in Salem, which was a leather factory. My father, being the youngest, was spared that. Over the course of time, each of his older siblings died in some way of cancer, more than likely related to the mill work, but that was the way of life. And I say that, again, you're a product of your time. You do what you have to do to survive, and he did that as well. And I think all of our parents, or all of our, and those listening, and as I look across at Katie, we all do what we have to do, and it's not a burden. It's not. It's what we do, and I embrace it at times. If it was easy, it wouldn't be fun. To be on vacation 365 days a year isn't a vacation. That's a lifestyle, and the balance of life, I think sometimes in this day and age, without philosophically bearing off, is that more isn't better all the time. And I think that stepping back and appreciating what you've accomplished, what we've accomplished to this point, knowing that you look to the past to guide your future, that balance has served us well for a long time. And I think that in the macro, it's a good structure going forward. That's what I think.
Well, I can't even begin to thank you enough for sharing all of that with me. That you're just a fascinating person. You're fascinating to listen to. Your knowledge of the history of this community is just it's incredible, really. I thank you for your dedication to the community and to the history. I mean, it's really just logging on to Facebook and seeing the posts. It's good. It's a good thing.
No, I submit, as a brief only side, yes, I have social media. I submit to you, is an asset, despite what people say. I'll give you a historical relativity. When we were children, all of us, we went to a news agency store, Fowles perhaps, and Newburyport people here in my town was the Danvers News Agency. And you went to that rack when you walked in. The bottom rack was full of newspapers from across the universe. There was magazines as you climbed the rows, and then at the top row were those ones all bundled in cardboard that only Dad looked at. So, but it was always incumbent on the person entering the store seeking information to know what newspaper he was picking up, what point of view he was going to get, what magazine he was picking up, Time, Newsweek, U.S. News, World and Report, the likes of them. That some people today would dismiss social media as not information worthy or suspect. I submit to one and all here that just like you were asked and tasked in your day to be aware of what you're reading and the point of view offered, I tell my 90-year-old friends to my 20-year-old friends, the old adage, consider the source, then as now reigns true, that the delivery comes through electronically now as opposed to ink, as sad as it is the reality that we need to accept. And I think that sometimes more often than not, we're our own worst enemies. Social media can be, but at the same time, as this is everywhere, you get out of anything what you put into it. And I think if you looked, there's a lot of wonderful resources on social media, and I submit to you that from my seat, what I'm able to do wouldn't be possible without the electronic nature of the Salem deeds, or the mapping of Digital Commonwealth, the mapping of the Leventhal Map Center, these things, that is social media. It's not just the news. And I think people will be talked into a lousy corner without vetting it themselves. And I would hope that there are people that would give it the benefit of the doubt it deserves without being sold short on it.
Yeah.
Because I repeat, you get out of anything what you put into it. If you put in good vetting, then the source you'll be trusting will be good. As we've all heard growing up, it's trust but verify, but you still have to get out there.
Yeah,
You still have to look. You can't hide in a corner. That won't work. So here I am talking about history and advertising technology. It's the balance that we speak of, through and through. And it rests with all of us. And I say that I encourage all, come to the library, open up your own computer, and don't be afraid. And if you have questions, go to your library. They'll guide you to the proper resources that'll give you answers, because we grew up in the World Book Encyclopedia or Britannica. This day and age it's called social media, and it's beyond exponential what we have at our fingertips as opposed to what we thought we had on the shelf in our bedrooms when we were children.
Yeah.
And, I hope people will continue to explore themselves in that manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this feels like a natural that felt like a good place to end, unless if there was a question that you didn't get to that you'd like to answer. I don't even remember what I wrote at this point, so you feel free, or we can end here.
No, I thank you for your time. As things progress here, or this program wishes to grow, I would be more than happy to bring associates to have some more robust back and forth, so I can be corrected over and over by someone who lived it as opposed to someone who read it myself, because I'm only a little lad of 61, and I hope that I'll get to learn a lot more in my day. So thank you for your time, Katie. It was a wonderful opportunity, and I look forward to the program growing or being seeded with our conversation here. How's that?
That's wonderful. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.